Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Chun, the Director for the Center for Applied Research and Associate Professor of Information Systems here at Pepperdine University's Graziadio School of Business and Management. Welcome to the video interview for the Graziadio Business Review. Today we are very fortunate to interview one of my good colleagues and dear friends, Dr. Jorge Westerman. Dr. Westerman comes from MIT's Sloan Center for Digital Business, and he's made a lot of inroads with his recent research into the industry. He's recently published 2 books, which has gained a lot of notoriety from business executives. And the first book is IT Risk, Turning Business Threats into a Competitive Advantage. And this book is really interesting because it looks at not just IT risk, but agility risk and security risk that may exist in the organization. His second book is The Real Business of IT and How CIOs Can Create and Communicate Value. This book was recently announced as CIO Insight as the #1 IT book of 2009. So George, thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
Oh, glad to be here.
Great. So I have a couple of questions for you, and my hope for this interview is that we can get more insight from the research that you've done and the books that you've published, so that we can share with our readers many of the neat findings that you've had from your interviews.
Sure. Yeah.
So my first question is, what are some of the critical issues that businesses need to consider when they use IT to establish a competitive advantage?
Well, you know, the first thing that's really important is that most companies are not getting the advantage they can, because there's just this relationship. There's a relationship problem between IT and business people. And if you're like most organizations, you understand this, right? That either the IT people if you're on the business side, you just don't respect those IT people, or you don't speak the same language. Or the IT people, you know you've got more to say, but it's really hard to get that message through. People just aren't listening. And so what we're finding is the really important thing to do before you want to try to talk about innovation and strategic advantages, let's just get the basics right. And the real basic that needs to be solved is the relationship. So we all know, how do you manage relationships? How do you better improve relationships? It's through communication. And it's the same thing in IT. That if you can establish some good idea on value, what is it that you're in the business of doing and how well you're delivering it, that can improve that relationship really fast. So in this book, we talk about it in studying dozens of turnarounds, in addition, over 250 surveys with non-IT executives. What we find out is that this conversation about value, if you want to move from the IT department being poorly functioning or being disrespected to being that true source of competitive advantage, they go through steps. And the first of all is to think differently about what IT is in the business of doing. And especially for IT people, start talking a little differently about, you're not about technology people, you're about actually moving the company forward and talking more about value, not just about the technology stuff. From there, being really strategic, if you're an IT person, you got to first show you can do your job right. And so show very clearly that you deliver the right services at the right price, at the right level of quality. And if you can do that, you get the opportunity to have a conversation. Meanwhile, if you're on the other side, if you're feeling IT is not delivering, put some measures in place for quality, service, and price to figure out whether things are getting better or not. So then you can talk about where to focus. It's only when you get to that point, then you can take on the next challenge. So step 3 is getting a handle on how you're investing in projects. And what that means is not just selling projects to the person who yells loudest, but being really clear, why are you doing these projects? And then going back and figuring out whether you get the benefit you promise. As you do that, you fix IT, then you fix the way you invest in projects. That next piece of getting strategic advantage, it comes almost naturally. It's just, now you've got things fixed, you can make it happen. The problem that people run into is trying to get that innovation and strategic advantage before things are fixed. When they're broken, you're just not going to get there. So you kind of had to go through these steps to get there. And it's all about communicating about the value you're delivering in different places along the path.
You've done a lot of research on the role of the Chief Information Officer, and this role of the Chief Information Officer has existed for the last 50, 60 years. And it started off primarily as a person who used to sit in the back of the computer room and just used to crunch numbers. And then this role evolved a little bit more towards a person who would, help work with the business to improve operations. Can you give us a little bit more insight about what you've observed of how CIOs' roles have evolved over the last several years?
Well, one of the big things that's been happening is as outsourcing has been getting so good, and as technology has been getting so cheap in terms of its price performance, the IT job is no longer about feeding that big, ugly behemoth mainframe that used to be in the back room. It's moved beyond that. The technology should just be a given. The networks just should run. Emails should be delivered. Systems should just be running. Now, they break from time to time, but not that much. The CIO's job shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about running IT operations anymore. It shouldn't be about technology. It should be really about how are you going to power your company forward with technology? It should be about what projects do you want to do? How are we going to make sure that everybody does their job so when the technology goes in, the organization's ready for it? And then more and more from there. So the biggest change I'm seeing in terms of the role of the head of IT is that it's becoming much more a business executive role with an IT specialty as opposed to being an IT specialist trying to have conversations. Now, it's not happening in every company, but what we're seeing is it can happen in any company. You just got to get through these steps to make sure you move there. In an ideal world, you can't tell the IT executive apart from anybody else when you're having the strategic conversations. And it's just a matter of building up the relationship, building up your understanding of each other to get there.
George, studies have shown that in 29% of CIOs, they've never had a job in IT before. What's the implications behind this?
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? I mean, can you imagine being put in charge of something as complex as IT, having no technical background whatsoever? And yet, here we are, a third of the companies that's happening. And I see that as both a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is, I think the senior teams of companies are waking up to how important IT is in the organization. And they're waking up so much that they're willing to take a business person out of P&L and put them in charge of IT. The bad thing is, why couldn't they find that person in IT to do it? And I think what it means is that they're looking for somebody who can speak the right language, who can really talk about how are we going to push the business forward? What is the business case here? How are we going to innovate with technology? And maybe they're not finding that from their technical people. So what that means if you're a technical person, you got to learn to speak that language. And the way you do that is you talk with a lot of people. What's driving you? What's going to get you your bonus this year? How can I help you be successful? And if you're a non-IT executive, it's interesting, several of the, I won't name them, but several of the CIOs we talked to who were in this 29%, one guy, for example, said, when I got the job, I thought I had done something wrong. Why are they taking me out of P&L and putting me in charge of this overhead function? I thought really that this was like a step out the door. And the interesting thing is, you look at him 4 years later, he's transformed the IT function. And it turns out that he thinks it's the best thing that ever happened to him. Because IT powers processes. IT helps other people be successful. And now he's ready for his next step because he's now made friends throughout the organization and he understands how the company works better than almost anybody else there. So actually, we put a thing on the Harvard blog a little while back, should your next job be CIO? And it was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but we talk about rotational programs. Maybe as part of the executive ranks, you want to run through technology at some point to get that feel for how you're powering the company forward.
Interesting. There's a lot of trends that are happening out in the industry. We've got cloud computing, we've got social networking. Can you talk to our viewers about several of the trends that are happening out in the technology industry and how we may be affected in the corporations and how we can better prepare ourselves?
So there are the number of big technologies out there that are getting a lot of hype. Cloud is one you mentioned. Mobility, social media, analytics, and even this idea of the Internet of Everything. And there's certainly a lot of hype out there about this, and there's certainly a lot of people out there talking about if you're not doing this, you're going to die. It sounds a lot like e-commerce did 10 years ago, or 12 years ago now. And we know what happened with e-commerce. Although some people died and some people survived, most people ended up doing a pretty good job with e-commerce, but not quite in the way we expected. And these technologies look like that next wave, that they're going to come together and make big changes in the world, but not quite like what we expect. What we're seeing in some studies, some just initial findings in some studies we're doing is that a lot of people out there starting to experiment with this technology, but some people are truly, truly transforming their businesses with it. Now you got to be able to put together that vision. You got to be able to deliver on that vision, that truly transformative thing. But there you're not talking about your social media campaign. You're talking about how you're going to reach 1 million customers so much faster than you would have been before. So if we talk about, if getting IT right, first you get the technology right, and then you focus on how you're improving the business. These technology trends are just the same. It's not about doing a mobile app. It's about how that mobile app's going to cement you so much tighter for knowing where your customer is and cement that relationship even stronger. And if you speak to it in that language, then mobile might be a part, social might be a part, but it's really about changing the business, and technology just plays a role in enabling that.
Excellent. Well, George, I learned a lot from our talk, and I want to thank you very much for doing this video interview. On behalf of Pepperdine University's Graziadio School of Business and Management, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. For more information on Dr. Jorge Westerman, please visit him at the MIT Sloan Center for Digital Business. And if you're interested in reading more about his work, his 2 books are available on Amazon.com. Thank you.